Coming up on today's Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports, Chase Sr. hanging out here with you as your host, taking your questions from our subscribers and our real ones, going into a huge offseason for Philadelphia as they look to defend their Super Bowl championship. And I know that they just won the Super Bowl, but some big roster decisions loom, and I expect Howie Roseman to be aggressive once again in trying to continue to stay as a championship-level contender. Before we do that and take your questions, hurts so good. If you're pumped up about being a champ, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. Everybody who's watching the show right now should be pumped up about being a champion. Caribbean Craig with this $20 super chat. Thank you so much for donating to the show. If you're watching the show after our live program, you want to send in a super thanks, we certainly appreciate that as well. Any players who you think would take team-friendly deals to stay in Philadelphia to try to run it back? That winning might be important than getting the bag. I expect Josh Sweat and Milton Williams to get the bag. And I think that both of those players could land deals which pay them on an average annual value basis $15 to $20 million per season. And I think for Sweat, he's in his late 20s. He had that really bad knee injury during his high school career. He's had such a productive career with Philadelphia. But when you have 2.5 sacks of Patrick Mahomes, you do it on the biggest stage, and you're 6'5", 265 with physicality and a fast get-off, and you've put up steady production as a pass rusher, a team is going to pay you top dollar because teams are trying to build their teams like the Eagles. Stout up front, getting after the quarterback. And so I think Sweat is going to get paid by a team like Arizona, and it could be the final big contract that he gets in his NFL career. For Milton Williams, he was a third-round pick back in 2021 who's developed so much with the Eagles. He hasn't made a lot of money up to this point. And now I think a team is going to offer him potentially $20 million per season. He's 25 years old. He was the second highest graded pass rushing defensive tackle in the game while playing less than 50% of the snaps. He had 2 sacks in the Super Bowl, 5 sacks in the regular season. At about 300 pounds, a unique blend of size, speed, explosiveness, and physicality. He can wreck games by his lonesome, and if he goes somewhere else, he gets more playing time. The numbers go up. I think he'll be worth the price tag. And so those are 2 players who I do not think will take hometown discounts. 2 players who I think might. Mekhi Becton found a home with Philadelphia. Why not continue to stay with the place that has helped you revive your career while still making $10 to $14 million per season? I think he's more of a natural fit at right guard, not an offensive tackle. And then Zach Bond. Zach Bond is an older linebacker who's in his late 20s, 1 year of really good production. And like Becton, he revived and found himself in his career with the Eagles. And I think those are 2 priorities that Howie Roseman knows. They're very important players to bring back. Becton played a huge role in the run game success, pass game success as a blocker, and then Zach Bond and Jalen Carter were the 2 glues of this Eagles defense, and Bond was everywhere. And so I think those 2 players come back. Eagles can get them at a decent rate. I think Williams and Sweat, they dip out. Luis, watching from Brazil. I know it's early, but talking about the draft, if available at number 32, would you prefer Tyler Warren or Donovan Iziraku, the edge? Shout out to Brazil. How about the Eagles starting their season in Brazil to Bourbon Street and ending it with the parade down Broad Street? It doesn't get better than that. As for Tyler Warren, one of my favorite players in this draft class, he's an absolute dog, a special athletic specimen with the size, physicality, speed, yak ability, hands, and positional versatility at the tight end position. Honestly, he might be my 4th favorite player in this class. Abdul Carter, number 1, Mason Graham, number 2, Travis Hunter, number 3, and Tyler Warren, number 4, as I start my draft prep. I love him, but he's not going to be available at number 32, unfortunately. I do think that the Eagles could go trenches, either offensive tackle or defensive end defensive tackle, to replace Josh Sweat or Milton Williams at number 32. Paul C., we should move up in the second round and draft somebody like Mason Taylor. For Dallas Goedert, we will always love and appreciate him, but he's slowly regressing and playing like a top tight end. So, in speaking of Mason Taylor, moving up in the second round, I think that's a little bit too early for him. I do like Mason Taylor as a tight end out of LSU. There is a pretty big gap between Tyler Warren and all of the other tight ends. I'd probably go Tyler Warren number 1, Colston Loveland number 2, Mason Taylor number 3, and maybe the Miami seam stretching tight end as number 4. But that is a position that I think the Eagles might need to address in the draft. Dallas Goedert is entering the final year of his contract in 2025, has a pretty big cap hit for this upcoming season. And if the Eagles give him a contract extension, I think you just have Dallas Goedert and you have Grant Calcaterra, and that's your tight end 1-2 punch right there. Then you don't really have to draft the tight end. If you move on from Dallas Goedert and you go with Calcaterra and another tight end, then yeah, I think drafting a tight end becomes a priority. But Dallas Goedert misses a lot of time in the regular season. But boy, does he come through in the playoffs. Second to Devontae Smith in postseason receiving yards all time in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles. Jeff Chipper, $10 super chat. Congrats to the Eagles again. Dak Prescott is back. Are you concerned about the Cowboys taking the division back in 2025? You know what's crazy? For all of the success that the Eagles have had since the turn of the century, 8 NFC Championship game appearances since 2001, 4 Super Bowl appearances, countless division titles. No team has won back-to-back division titles in the NFC East since 2004. I think that ends. Now, the Commanders are sneaky, no doubt about it. I think the Cowboys might be improved, but huge question marks at head coach, and there's always drama around that team. I think the Giants are going to stink once again, even if they trade for Matthew Stafford. And there will be competitors to the Eagles in this division, in Dallas and in Washington. But if Mekhi Becton comes back, the Eagles return all 11 starters on offense. They do have a new play caller, so we'll see. But they had a new play caller in Kellen Moore, and they won 14 games. Now, more experience, Patullo not. So that's a little bit of a concern, but you still have your offensive core in place. I think that Jalen Hurts can continue to take another leap, confidence-wise, and with this game. You put more on his plate, I think he'll be just fine. You have a loaded offense. Your defense, number 1 in the NFL in 2024. You bring back Vic Fangio. Even if you lose a couple of players, there is depth there on that side of the ball. And so I think it would be a huge disappointment if the Eagles don't win back-to-back NFC East titles. I think they can run it back and win a Super Bowl once again. What say you? Which Eagles free agent, since we've talked a little bit about that here on today's show, is a must-sign for the Eagles? Let me know down in the comment section. As you venture down there, you'll see this link down in the show notes below the first paragraph of the description, chatsports.com/EaglesSB. You hit that, it's going to take you to our friends at Fanatics, and you can get swagged up and level up your fashion game with the best gear that exists right now, and that's Super Bowl 59 championship merchandise. Myself and Chip, we already got this hat. This vintage t-shirt is also pretty cool. I got a Jalen Hurts shirt of him hoisting the Lombardi. I also got the Eagle sweatshirt that we're about to show you right now. Get yours today to celebrate one of the most legendary performances in a Super Bowl ever at chatsports.com/EaglesSB. Andrew Nathan, I don't believe a trade for Myles Garrett will cost compensation for the 2025 draft. And if that is the case, Philadelphia could have 6 picks in the top 105 in 2026 via compensatory picks from Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. I think Andrew Nathan could launch his own YouTube channel because he's always bringing really good factoids, and that is correct. And that is something that Jeffrey Lurie actually referenced to Zach Berman, longtime media member who's been covering the Eagles for a long time and wrote a book on the Eagles. Lurie said, we're expecting some turnover this offseason. We're expecting some compensatory picks in 2026. The thing with Myles Garrett, I don't know if it costs only 1 first rounder. I think it might cost 2. And so are you willing to give up the 32nd pick this year and your first rounder in 2026, knowing that you're going to have those compensatory picks in 2026? You might not have a first rounder, but you'll have picks elsewhere. Here is another thing, too. Let's say that Josh Sweat gets $18 million. Let's say Milton Williams gets 20. That's $38 million right there to those two players. What if you let those two players walk for $38 million? You designate James Bradberry as a post-June 1 cut. You trade away Bryce Huff. And then you bring in Myles Garrett, who's on the books for $25 million average annual value. That is a genius-like Howie Roseman move that is so Howie Roseman. Maybe Howie watches this show, and he's watching right now saying, Chase, you're a smart dude. You can be in our front office. If that's the case, Howie, hit me up. I'd be interested. That'd be fun. Can I still host the channel? But that is an avenue in which the Eagles could go to land a player like Myles Garrett. Let me throw another name out there while we talk about Garrett, and we're on that topic. Because as we know, the Eagles always value pass rushers, and they could have a need there if they lose Williams and Sweat. A player who might cost less, who would be a great player on this team, who's not quite to the level of Myles Garrett, who's like the 1A, but might be a 1A minus or 1B. That's Maxx Crosby of the Las Vegas Raiders. He wants to win. His playing style would be perfect for the city of Philadelphia. He is a bull rush pass rusher who has a relentless pursuit, contagious energy, and is an absolute dog. And he's not going to cost as much in a trade as Myles Garrett. That could be a good thought too. Tanner Plummer, people were saying the same thing about Brian Johnson when they talked about continuity. I think this is a bad move. Yes, they were talking about that. Brian Johnson was a Howie Roseman guy. Kevin Patullo is a Nick Sirianni guy. Brian Johnson is very well respected. He was a quarterback's coach for Washington this year. We saw how Jane Daniels played. He got interviewed to be the Texans offensive coordinator, didn't get that job. But he is highly touted and highly valued in league circles as an offensive mind. It didn't work out. I think Nick Sirianni had a little bit too much influence. The fact that they were 32nd in pre-snap motion, that was a disaster. The Eagles didn't have Saquon Barkley last year. That plays a big role. They're going to have him in 2025, and hopefully he can continue to stay healthy. But look, Patullo has been a part of this Eagles staff since 2021. That has been a top 10 overall offense under the watch of Nick Sirianni. And so I think Sirianni has earned this. Patullo has been his right-hand man. He's been an associate head coach. Sirianni runs head coaching duties and decisions through him. He's been a part of game planning, was a part of game planning for Kellen Moore. And so when you're this late in the process too, you don't really have your pick of the litter, right? The options are slim. And the Eagles have to get going for the 2025 offseason starting right now. The Combine's next week. Starts on Tuesday. Free agency is March 14th. The draft is at the end of April. And so this was the decision. I stand by it, and we'll see if it's the wrong one, Tanner. But I get your concerns for sure. Andrew Nathan, again, this draft is so deep along the defensive line that I believe two of our first three picks should be defensive tackle and defensive end / outside linebacker. Your thoughts also. Keep an eye on Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon, physical run stopper and pass rusher. Harmon's a freak, too. I like him as a player, no doubt about it. And look, that strategy would not surprise me. That's how Howie builds his teams. And especially if they let Milton Williams walk and Josh Sweat walk, they have Moro Ajomo, Jalix Hunt, and Jordan Davis still on this team. Can you get anything from Bryce Huff playing-wise or trade-wise? There are 15 to 20, maybe even more defensive tackles who have high grades in this 2025 draft class. And so you can get some really good defensive tackles, first round, second round, third round. Defensive end, maybe you go there first round, you go defensive tackle after that. Outside linebacker, some good ones as well, who are stand-up pass rushers, like a Nolan Smith, position-wise. So yeah, wouldn't surprise me at all if the Eagles go that route. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. Always good to chop it up with the Bird Gang. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.